Awesome. Well, thanks for that feedback, everyone. We are going to jump right in. Here's a little bit about the agenda for the evening. After we go through this, we'll talk through a little bit of expectations and a little more introduction information about roundtables and kind of how that fits into what this Lowdown Live is and what you can expect to get tonight. Then we'll talk about navigating the pivot page and buckets of the resources that you can find on the page. We will do a resource overview. There are 4 areas we're going to talk about specifically: ritual, retention, chapter meetings, and DEIA. And then we'll have a general Q&A and wrap up with a couple final poll questions. If at any point you have a question, please feel free to use the chat or come off of mute, whichever you prefer. We are happy to answer those and work through the content tonight together. So we're gonna go ahead and get started. To kick us off tonight, I think one of the things that we hope that you all will gain from this Lowdown Live is really a better understanding of what exists out there to help inform your chapter's needs for this upcoming term and in year at large. We know that it is a very different world that we are living in right now, and the sorority experience looks very different than it has before. And fortunately, we have all of these great resources that you can reference. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those are and what you can expect to find in each of the resources. What you may not hear us talk too much about tonight is how to take those resources and really tailor them to your specific chapter experience. And there's a very specific reason for that. And that is because in the upcoming week, some of you may have already received communication about this from us, depending on your officer position. But most chapter officers will be having the opportunity to participate in officer roundtables over the next couple of months. Those will be led by the collegiate support specialist and leadership consultant that support your district. And on those roundtables, you'll have the opportunity to talk with other chapter officers in your district that are serving in the same officer position as you about how you're implementing the resources and the tools that you have accessible to you to best tailor to your chapter experience. So while tonight we'll talk a lot about the what, the how will come after tonight, and that will be in those continued follow-up conversations that you'll have in the roundtables and one-on-one conversations with your LC or your CSS or your advisory board or the district coordinators that support your district. But just wanted to kind of let you all know what to expect in our conversation tonight and be excited to be on the lookout for these roundtables that are coming your way in the next couple of weeks. Next week's roundtables kick off with the VPNME and VPP, so definitely register for those if you have not already. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to the collegiate support specialist for your district that sent you the information. All right, well, now that we've talked a little bit about expectations and roundtables, I'm going to pass it to Annika to walk us through how to navigate the pivot page.
So the first thing that we want to talk about is how to access all of the pivot resources, since that's what we're going to be focusing our time on. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to show you all how to access the resources. You're first going to want to navigate over to sigmakappa.org. We have a little pivot tab here on the right-hand side, and you're going to want to click that. Once you do, scroll down here to the Officer Resources square and click the click here to check them out. This is going to redirect you to log in. My login information automatically populates. You will need to probably place yours in. Click login and it will redirect you back to the Pivot Officer Resources page. Once you get here, all of the resources are organized by topic areas. So we have chapter operations, technology, sisterhood and social events, and so on. So they're organized in these accordion folders for you to quickly and easily find what you're looking for. For example, some resources that you can find within chapter operations include the alternative membership statuses resource, no more SOE determine what to do next resource, all of our individual and chapter needs survey, and you have feedback now what documents, and so on. Then down here, we also have a ritual category, which we will most certainly talk more about this evening about new member ceremony and initiation. Down here, we have more on new members, programming, academics. There's really something for everyone in your chapter, and we highly encourage you to check out this page and check out all of the resources. We will spend time going over specific resources in 4 different areas. However, all of these items are available to you and your executive council whenever you may need them.
Perfect, thanks Annika. Okay, so now that you know a little bit about where to find the resources, I'm going to point out the ritual related resources that we have up on the website right now for your access. We'll start with new member ceremony because as many of you are having new members join through recruitment right now, naturally that's the first ritual ceremony that kind of happens for those new members. There are multiple places that you can find new member ceremony information. There's a resource for a fully virtual new member ceremony to be held on Zoom, and there's a resource for a socially distant in-person ceremony, new member ceremony to be held if your chapter is able to have in-person gatherings. You can find each of these respectively under the different accordions. So if you come under in-person and you scroll down here to the bottom, you'll see new member ceremony socially distant. This resource is under the in-person accordion and it is under the hybrid accordion. And when you click on it, you'll see a bunch of different things are included in here. Always, and first and foremost, health and safety guidelines. You're definitely going to want to follow those. And then you can find other information about how to manage room capacity, how to handle pinning of the new members, music, and physically moving the new members throughout the space. All of that information can be found in here. The virtual resource, naturally, can be found under online chapters. So if you look on here, you'll find new member ceremony online. And this resource, while it will have the same information in the sense of it'll cover how to pin the new members, it'll cover how to manage music in the ceremony, it's going to go very in depth on how to handle the logistics of managing a Zoom account for a ritual ceremony. Currently, right now, the new member ceremony is the only ritual ceremony that you can do fully virtually on your own as a chapter. We know several of you put questions in the registration form about virtual initiation. And if you saw the pivot email that went out about 2 weeks ago, if your chapter is not able to conduct a socially distant initiation and you need to consider a virtual initiation, you will need to email reports@sigmakappa.org with information about why you are unable to host an in-person initiation, and we will work with you to host a virtual one. Right now, though, those are being managed by staff because there's so many logistics with the Zoom that we want to make it easier for you all to just have to jump on the Zoom and get going with the ceremony and not have to worry about all the pieces behind the scenes. That's what we'll do for you. So that being said, you'll only find this virtual new member ceremony resource in the online version right now. If your chapter is unable to host that socially distant version, you just email us and let us know, and we will work with you one-on-one to get that scheduled. That being said, the socially distant initiation resource that you can find both in the in-person and hybrid version of the accordions. So that will be right here, initiation socially distant. And a couple things that I wanted to point out in this resource, one in particular related to kind of placement and organization of the room. We really want to limit how much you move the new members around the room during the ceremony. So pay close attention to pinning of the new members, the placement of pillows, and also how you initiate the new members in the room itself. With that placement of chairs and just how many people you admit into the room. Given our current circumstances, we want to make sure your health and safety and the health and safety of your new members comes first in any of these instances. You can also find information about model meeting in the socially distant initiation resource. I know that has been a question that has come up, and this will walk you through how to manage model meeting for your chapter if you're doing it in person and socially distant. Currently, those are the resources we have for initiation out on the website. I know there have been also some questions about Order of the Triangle, and seeing as that will likely not be until later in the term, we will be able to provide more information about that when the time comes. But in the meantime, you have access to information about new member ceremony and virtual initiation for outstanding new members in the spring, or an in-person socially distant initiation for those spring outstanding new members, or even for those fall new members to come.
Okay, if you think of any, feel free to put them in the chat and we will come back to them at the end. Okay, moving on to retention. This number works for me, I apologize. My screen's always slow. Okay. Under the in-person, hybrid, and online accordion folder, the #1 resource that you will see is called Individual and Chapter Needs Survey, in-person and hybrid. And then if you come down to the online category, it just says online. So it's essentially the same thing. For the purpose of tonight, since the majority of you all are on hybrid campuses, I'm going to share the hybrid version of it. But just know for our online friends that is very similar. There are just a few differences. So when thinking about retention, this is probably one of the biggest topics that is on everyone's mind right now of how do we retain all of our members and how do we keep everyone engaged? Lots and lots of different things that we have put together to try and help you create a retention plan for your chapter. And the first one that I have pulled up for you all is this Individual and Chapter Needs Survey. So what we have put together in this resource is a list of roughly 24 questions, it might be 22 in the online version, of different things to ask your chapter members to really get a good idea of where everyone is at. We ask different questions about where are you living this semester in terms of what do we need to keep in mind for scheduling chapter meetings, to do you have Wi-Fi access at your residence, to different things about how your chapter members want to see their sorority experience play out this fall. This will really aid you in creating a plan and then ultimately addressing retention, because you are going to be able to give your chapter members what they are looking for. Now, will you be able to give it to everyone? No. But through this survey and looking at the data that you get from it, you'll really have an idea of if your chapter members want to see educational programming weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, every other month, once a semester, or maybe they're just not going to be able to participate in that at all because they have other family and home life obligations during this COVID era. I would highly, highly, highly encourage all of you that are chapter presidents and officers and advisors, which is everyone on this call, to really take a look at this and consider doing this survey. You can tailor it to your own chapter. We highly encourage that. If there are additional questions, if there are modifications that you want to make, that is absolutely fine. This is something that is a starting place for you, a baseline. You can take it and run with it and make it whatever you need to make it. We have attached instructions for how to do a Microsoft form, a Google form, and SurveyMonkey. But again, it is completely up to you what platform you want to use. Any way that you can generate this feedback is great. If you're feeling really go-getter, you can even try doing it on Omega One. It might be a lot of questions to upload in the Omega One, but another option for you all. So after you would do that survey, we also have the document that lives right below it called You Have Chapter Feedback, Now What? And again, there is a different version for our online chapters since the questions are a little bit different. So this is really meant to guide the executive council as you review your data from the survey. So there are different questions. It explains what you were really looking for in each of the questions. And then all the way down here, we have outlined how to create a chapter experience action plan. And again, this is not a direct requirement. This is a recommendation for how you can really build what that experience is going to be this fall for your members and have a way to communicate it out and have it be data-based for those of you that are big into data like myself. So first, you're going to talk a little bit more about goals. Second, you're going to determine how often you should host events based on the questions that were within the survey. And then ultimately, you're going to create the shareable plan and then be able to share it out with your chapter members. There's a couple other resources that are linked in here a couple times, like the No More SOE Determine What to Do Next document. That can be really helpful as you make this, and then along with some other quick little things that we know are always favorites, like the Walk to End Alzheimer's, so on and so forth. But again, highly, highly encourage you to check out this survey. And even if you don't use these exact questions, use ones that are meaningful for your chapter that are going to provide you the feedback that you need to make this semester a success. The next resource that I'm going to show you is down here. This Belonging in Sigma Kappa accordion folder contains a ton of great stuff. So as I mentioned earlier, a lot of it is a little bit more programming based, but these are activities and you can absolutely do them in a virtual or hybrid setting. So a couple of my favorites, the chapter member check-in is very similar to the survey that was created, and this is also a survey, but just a different survey. So this one explains how to do it, walks you through the facilitation and things that you can do. Very simple, quick, and easy one to do. Another one of my favorites in here is the Belonging and Vulnerability workshop. This is another great one, and something that you're going to notice is that these are all under 30 minutes long. So these are very quick, nothing that is going to take hours and hours of time. So get together on a Zoom, have an advisor facilitate this, have a chapter member facilitate, whomever you would like to do it. And for those of you that attended RLC this past year, this whole entire section of content is based off of that belonging concept from RLC. So if you remember that and your chapter really liked that, I would definitely encourage you to check out all of these resources. And the last one that I want to highlight is this positive affirmations activity. This is a really great one that even if you want to just pull bits and pieces from these and just do the activities, they will really help with morale and ultimately retention. So in here, there's a couple different options for how you can do these positive affirmations. I'm sure that some of you have used word cloud in the past or a similar platform. I know a lot of chapters like to use Canva. That's another great one. But again, there's directions in here for how to do this activity in an in-person socially distant setting and then also in a virtual setting. So definitely check this one out. It's definitely a feel-good activity, a great one to do maybe if you're trying to figure out what's that first thing to do when we all come back together as a chapter. Great one, but really you can't go wrong with anything in the Belonging series. They're all really great things that were created by very experienced women in curriculum and content writing, so definitely check them out. And then the last tab or accordion folder that I want to show you is just the engaging your members section. So again, lots of different great stuff in here to really get everyone engaged with one another again after being apart for so long. Most of you have probably been apart for 6 months. Some of you are still apart. Some of you will continue to be apart with the hybrid mix in your campuses, but definitely a lot of different great things in here. The Summer of Sisterhood, just Fall of Sisterhood. Continue those great virtual activities that really allow for everyone to be involved. You can definitely continue to use these resources even though they were made for summer. So definitely be on the lookout for more things to come, but those are just the start of some of the things that will help with retention. Ultimately, we definitely want to share that you definitely consider what is best to do for your chapter. You know your sisters the best. You know what those underlying root causes and issues are as to why people might be overwhelmed with the sorority experience, or maybe what they're not getting enough out of the sorority experience. So work with your executive councils and your advisors to start to formulate a plan. And remember that your programming coordinators, your collegiate district directors, and everyone else is always here to support you in addition to staff. And we will always have a conversation about retention and engagement. It's one of our favorite topics. So definitely engage in those, and we hope to see those strategies work for you this fall. And with that, I will turn it back over to Sarah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, before we do that, actually, let's pause. Any questions on those retention resources before I change the subject to chapter meetings? I realize as we start talking about that those are two different topics. So any questions about retention first? Okay, well, if any questions come up, pop them in the chat and we can come back to them. As we transition to talking a little bit about chapter meetings, that was something that we heard from you all in the question and answer portion of the registration that you completed that you wanted to learn more about. So there are a couple resources to point out related to chapter meetings. The first one, and this is kind of a resource that I would say is applicable for any chapter gathering, but the first one that probably comes to mind in a chapter gathering is a chapter meeting. And this resource is called Guidelines for Chapter Gatherings and Events. You can find it under the in-person and hybrid accordion. And what you will find in this resource is, of course, health and safety first, as always. And then really how to assess what kind of space your chapter can fit in and how many people you can allow in that space at one time. We know that everyone is talking about the 6 feet distance, and so how do you really figure out what 6 feet looks like in the on-campus space that you might be meeting in, your chapter facility, or whatever space you might be using depending on what's available to you in your campus, either on your campus or in your campus area. Another couple things that you might find in here, this is a really great tool that can be applied to chapter meetings or anything in between, is really implementing a small group model for your chapter. For any chapter gathering, chapter meeting, chapter event, similarly to what Annika was saying about retention, this will probably aid in retention because people will be in a smaller setting to connect with one another. But this resource walks you through what a small group model, as referred to in this resource as founders groups, could look like for your chapter. So if you think about maybe you have 100 members in your chapter, and you can only gather in groups of up to 25 at a time. I'm just using those numbers because they're easy right now for me to do math with this evening. You would have 4 different groups of founders. So each founder name could be named a group. So you have the Mary Lowe group, and the Mary Lowe group decides to come to chapter on Monday night in person. Well, maybe on Tuesday night, the Elizabeth group decides to come to chapter in person. And kind of this resource will walk you through, if you're interested in implementing a small group model for your chapter, how to do that, whether that's for chapter meetings as a whole, or for any activity or event that you might be able to host in person. The reason this is also a hybrid resource is because we know that some of you might have 50% of your members on campus and 50% of your members wherever they are around the country. And that being said, you can tailor those small groups to fit the needs of that. Do you need to have 2 virtual small groups and 2 in-person small groups? What does that look like for your chapter? This resource will help you figure out how to implement that. The other resource that is going to be very beneficial when it comes to chapter meetings is under hybrid and online. And this resource is called Formal Chapter Meetings, Hybrid, and Online. So pretty easy to remember. In this resource, you will find 3 different recommendations for how to manage chapter business and chapter meetings during this very different term that we are in. The first thing that I think we would want to emphasize to all of you is we always want you to feel empowered to figure out this term, like Annika said, what's going to be the best membership experience for your chapter? And part of that means, do you need to have a chapter meeting every week? Maybe you do need to have a chapter meeting every week, so it is a great time for your chapter to come together, connect, handle any chapter business you have, and then go on your way throughout the rest of the week. Maybe that touch point for everyone is really beneficial. Maybe there's too many people to make that touch point really beneficial for your chapter every single week, so it needs to be a little bit less frequent this term, given the nature of everything. You are able to take this resource and the options that are provided in this resource and tailor it to what your chapter needs are, so that you can really make sure that your chapter meetings are beneficial whenever, however, whatever platform you're using, in person, online, anything in between, whatever that looks like for you, you can tailor it to that. So the 3 different options that are presented and outlined in this resource, the first one is fully virtual chapter meetings. Maybe you're a hybrid campus, maybe you're an in-person campus, but you just realize that having fully virtual chapter meetings is going to be a lot easier than navigating social distancing. That's okay. Work with your advisory board, work with the rest of your executive council, and identify if that's what works for you all, how can you implement that? This portion of the resource under option 1 is going to give you some great recommendations on how to manage a fully virtual chapter meeting. The second option under here, if you keep scrolling, will be in person and virtual chapter meeting simultaneously. So for those of you who are in a hybrid model, or even those of you who are fully in person but limited in the number of people you can have in person, you might choose to have both an in-person and virtual meeting happening simultaneously. And how that might look is some of you are in the room physically meeting on Zoom, and the rest of your members might be back into their dorms or their apartments or wherever they may be, watching the meeting happening and participating via Zoom or whatever other platform your chapter chooses to use if it's not Zoom. That being said, we know there's a lot of logistics that come with managing that, because you're managing an in-person version and online version of the meeting. And so this portion of the resource is going to really walk you through, how do you do that? What do you do with the executive council? Do they all go in person? Do they all go virtual? What if some of them want to be in person, but you as chapter president would feel more comfortable being virtual? What does that look like? This part of the resource will give you some really great tools on how to answer those questions and how to navigate that for your chapter. The last portion of the options for this chapter meeting resource are to pursue those founders groups in a small group setting, held either in person or virtually every week. So for some of our larger chapters, this is an option that I would really encourage you to consider. Might be an effective tool not only for managing chapter meetings, but really to keep your members engaged and to keep your, to retain your members and that morale for the chapter throughout the term. And the reason for that is because we all know that sitting on a Zoom screen where you have to scroll a couple pages to see everyone's faces isn't always easy after these last couple of months. And if you can implement a small group version of that, it might be a lot easier for people to stay connected and to engage with one another, just like they would if they were in person, but unfortunately through a computer screen, which is what we're all doing these days. That being said, the Founders Group model is outlined here, and kind of implementing that, what that might look like for your chapter if you were to meet either all in person or some in person and some virtually, depending on the group. You can see an example meeting week that is suggested on the resource, and kind of how to navigate that for your chapter. The last resource I will point out that doesn't necessarily relate to chapter meetings, but because you're all on here and I think it will help inform some of your decision making when it comes to chapter meetings, I wanted to make sure to note it. And that is the best practices for chapter officers, hybrid and online. You can find this one under the hybrid accordion and under the online accordion. Although even if your campus is fully in person, I'm sure you can find some great tips on this resource as well. This resource is going to give you some suggestions on communication, how to manage technology, time zones, how to stay connected with your general chapter members when normally you might see them around campus, in your chapter house if you have a facility, or just interacting wherever you find your natural flow in your day if you were together in person. So if you're interested or wondering what that looks like for, navigating this virtual world as a chapter officer, I would definitely encourage you to take a look at this resource. And it talks a little bit about virtual executive council meetings as well, which might be a great tool for you and your chapter during this term. All right.
Great. We will end it with resources related to DEIA. So coming back to the pivot page, the first resource that I want to show you all is under membership growth and recruitment. This is a new resource that was released a couple of weeks ago, and it is called Inclusive Recruitment Conversations. So for the majority of you, I'm sure that you all are in recruitment season right now. So this is a great workshop, or rather just conversation to have prior to recruitment beginning. So this is a 90-minute workshop that was created. It is definitely worth it to take the time. And even if you are not in recruitment right now, I would still highly encourage your chapter executive council to find a way to do this program. It is really great. It's very thorough and will really get good dialogue and conversations happening amongst your members. I'm not going to scroll all the way through it for you, but the other resource that's very similar for those of you that like to watch videos and pre-recordings down here under the virtual trainings, there was a recent Trisha talk, which is actually for recruitment supervisors, but we always encourage all of our chapter officers, if they ever want to attend one of those sessions, they are more than welcome to as well. So a lot of our vice presidents of membership attended this session, but they also did one on diversity, equity, inclusion, access during recruitment. This is roughly an hour long. It is really a great recording. Definitely highly encourage all of you to share that with your chapters, or if not, use it as an informal chapter programming piece that you all watch it together, whether that's in a socially distanced space or whether you all are back in your dorm rooms, apartments, and other residence halls. But great video, it's up there for your access. In addition to that workshop, I will say that some of the content is similar, but a lot of it is different. So they don't necessarily go hand in hand, but definitely two great resources as you all are in this recruitment season, or as you're even thinking about the spring recruitment season for those of you on campuses that push back to the spring. The other resources that I wanted to highlight are within good old Workshop Warehouse. So don't forget that in here for your VPPs, and really all of you that are officers, there are different workshops in here that touch on diversity and inclusion right now. Now, I will tell you, we have 5 different creative teams that are working to create brand new resources for you all as we speak. They're on 5 different topics, all related to DEIA, and they will slowly start to push out resources throughout the fall semester. So one resource that I can tell you all about that's coming soon is going to be one that talks about going into the election season, how to do chapter elections without a bias present. So that is one that you can definitely be on the lookout for, that will really help you all have some great conversations with your whole chapter going into election season, along with many other things. But these workshops under our National and Global Citizenship, the Identity and Inclusion series, this is a great place to start and really pick out the content that your chapter is ready for, and wherever that place may be. It's a 4-part series, so some of you might want to start with part 1, others might think that you want to go to part 2, and it's completely dependent of where your chapter is and where your chapter members are at. You know your chapter the best. If you're not sure where chapter members are at, work with your advisory board to do a survey, to take a general poll and pulse check of just where are you at with this? Is your understanding still in the beginning stages, or is it more advanced? Because of course we want to always provide our members with opportunities for programming, and always remember that you can do different groups of programming as well. So if this group of chapter members is ready for this type of conversation, then you can provide that. And if you have a different group that's ready for a totally different conversation, then that's fine too. So make sure that you always provide those different opportunities no matter what the case is. But those are the items that I wanted to highlight related to DEIA, but definitely make sure that you keep an eye on your email. I know that that's not always the greatest thing to watch your inbox, but there will be lots and lots of other further information shared. And then also you might have seen, I believe it was earlier this week, we announced the DEIA committee that's going to be doing a lot of work for Sigma Kappa. For any of our D7 friends, Jessica Cunningham, your programming coordinator, is the co-chairwoman of that committee. So we're very happy for her, and you all are very lucky to have her out there with you. But be on the lookout. There's tons and tons more to come. Lots and lots more for DEIA chairwoman. I don't believe we have any on the call tonight, but for those of you chapter presidents that oversee them, know that more is coming. We are working on it as we speak with those 5 different teams and committee. So keep an eye out for it, and you'll definitely receive communication from us about it.